Welcome back to the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake. Scott is helping his son finish up the soccer season. And so in this week's episode, you get me only, but we do have a guest, so don't worry. In this week's episode, we feature Goslings Rum, and we have our guest, Alex Holmes, who is the brand director, joining us to discuss all things Bermuda and the rum that they're producing off the tiny little island that you may only know from the Bermuda Triangle. So we'll debunk all that while we go through this. So sit back and buckle in and listen to our newest episode featuring Goslings Rum. Andrew, it is a pleasure to meet you. Time zones are wonky and weird, right? They're not evenly distributed. And I learned something in the pre-meeting with you was, hey, the closest place you are is to North Carolina, but you don't share the same time zone. So thanks for hanging out with us a little bit later. It's 8:30 Eastern. What time is it there in Bermuda?
9:30.
9:30. So just you're an hour ahead.
Not too far away.
Yeah. But how are things? So it's we like to call it swampy season here in Kentucky. So we're getting high humidities. Temperatures are rising. So we're in the mid 80s already, and it's not just turned June. What's it like in Bermuda here in early June?
Yeah, so Bermuda's definitely known for high humidity as well. This time of year, the humidity starts to creep up. But fortunately, we have beautiful trade winds, nice ocean breeze. So it kind of helps to keep the cool vibes flowing around the island. But it never gets too hot here.
Yeah.
'Cause we are, quite far north compared to the Caribbean, where I believe a lot of people assume that Bermuda is located. But like you said, North Carolina's closest point of land, and it's one of the most isolated islands in the world.
Yeah. We were talking and I didn't know, much about Bermuda at all. And maybe that's my ignorance, or maybe that's the fact that it is a tiny island and I don't know about everything about tiny islands. So for the listeners, before we get into yours, tell us a little bit about the country and, how it's connected to British and how it, tourism and all of that.
Yeah, so Bermuda's a British dependent territory. So the actually oldest dependent territory of the UK. Officially became a territory in 1611. And it's 21 square miles, now inhabited by over 60,000 residents. A tiny little rock in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a volcanic island with sedimentary rock that's formed on top. The most northerly coral reef formation in the world. So the warm waters of the Gulf Stream flow right past the island, which keeps the water temperature warm, which allows the coral to flourish, which allowed the sedimentary rock to form on top of the volcanic rock. So because of the coral reef, Bermuda formed millions and millions of years ago. And it was discovered by Juan de Bermudez in the early 1500s. So that's where the name Bermuda comes from. He was a Spanish explorer, never claimed the island for Spain. And in 1609, Sir George Somers shipwrecked his boat called the Sea Venture off of Bermuda. And the Sea Venture was the flagship vessel on a convoy headed from England to Jamestown to relieve the starving colony. And so a hurricane came by and blew the Sea Venture off course. It shipwrecked off the east end of the island, ran aground on a reef. No one perished in the shipwreck, and they were able to get parts from the boat and build two more boats. So George Somers in 1609 decided this is a pretty beautiful spot. And in 1611, it officially became a British territory.
All right. So, and today you're still working with the good old Brits. However, you did share with me that you all smartened up and used the US dollar and not the British pound. So you get to save a little money there that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, the US dollar obviously is a great currency to be pegged against to, especially for global markets. And we do have the Bermuda dollar, so it's at par to US currency. On island, you can spend US currency or Bermuda dollars. But if you go to the bank, there's a slight exchange rate.
Yeah.
It's a good currency to use for sure. And Bermuda's, tourism was the peak in the 1970s and 80s, and now it's international business that's the biggest contributor to the GDP on the island. So the US dollar plays a good role in keeping that strong.
Oh, that's cool. So what changed the tourism kind of infrastructure to international business? Was there just some things that kind of set up right for Bermuda to kind of take off in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a combination of a few factors. One, air travel became a little more accessible. The reach of the flights became a little longer. It was easier to get to destinations that were a lot hard, a lot more exotic, a lot further away.
Yeah.
Whereas Bermuda was really competitive because of our proximity to the East Coast. You get a flight from New York, back then in a couple hours. Now it takes an hour and a half to fly from JFK to Bermuda, so it's really quite close. So I think other destinations sort of became more competitive because they It was a little easier to get to them. And
Yeah.
international business, Bermuda has no tax on capital gains. So that encouraged a lot of reinsurance to be on the island, which is basically companies that insure insurance companies.
Yep.
And as a result of that, a lot of financial services and legal services that come to support the reinsurance industry.
Oh, cool.
So now that's become a bigger part of our economy, but tourism is a close second and still remains a focus of Bermuda. And we, greet about 500,000 visitors to the island every year. We do have a lot of direct flights from New York, Atlanta, Miami, Charlotte, and then also London and Toronto as well. But we also have the cruise ships which come to the island.
Yeah.
And so, a couple ships in at any given time up in the West End at the Royal Naval Dockyard. And so that's always great to have the visitors on island. They enjoy the Bermuda lifestyle and the beaches and the golf courses. And it really is an incredible island.
Well, now that I know it's that close, it's time to... My wife just walked in. It's time to go to Bermuda. Yeah, we've already done the long flight to Barbados. Now we can take the short one over to Bermuda.
Yeah, you would connect in Atlanta or Charlotte and you'd be here quick.
Yeah, that's easy. That's easy money. So, speaking of, we were talking a little bit about Barbados. So obviously rum in the Caribbean is huge. So, for you all, was rum huge from the beginning for Barbados, or was there a natural spirit prior to that?
So Barbados is really, the birthplace of rum, right? That's kind of where rum originated. The Goslings themselves were wine and spirit merchants in the UK in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And it was William Gosling who decided he wanted to expand his business to the new colonies in America. So in 1806, he chartered a ship called the Mercury and loaded the boat up with 10,000 pounds sterling worth of wines and spirits. So if you could just imagine a pirate ship full of booze.
Yeah,
and
no
he
kidding.
decided he was going to remain in England where he could oversee the business, because obviously it's pretty risky to move that much product across the Atlantic in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And so he asked his eldest son, James, to get on the boat. Obviously, James was pretty excited to be getting on a boat with that much of his father's alcohol. And the world's first booze cruise set sail, and they never made it to America. So thankfully for us here in Bermuda, the boat was becalmed at sea, which meant there wasn't a lot of wind. Their charter was running out. And the captain said to James, look, we're either going back to England or we're going to drop you off in Bermuda, which was the closest British port. So the Goslings kind of arrived here by accident. But as I mentioned earlier, Bermuda is 21 square miles and now 60,000 residents. There's not a lot of agricultural land here.
Yeah.
We're also a lot further north. Sugarcane prefers a tropical climate. It will grow here in Bermuda. But again, we just don't have the land to cultivate any significant amount. So the Goslings, recognized that challenge when they first arrived on the island, and they arrived with whiskey, brandy, sherry, port wine, gin. They didn't have rum. But 3 years after they arrived in 1809, the construction began on the Royal Naval Dockyard up in the west end of the island. So that was the British Navy's, Atlantic outpost. And we all know what the British Navy likes to do.
Yeah.
So the Goslings knew there would be demand for rum in Bermuda, but also recognized the geographic challenges. So they began to source rums from all over the West Indies, shipping them to Bermuda, experimenting with blending and aging different rums together, and originally only selling it on draft. We don't manufacture much in Bermuda, so bottles were a very scarce commodity in the 1800s, early 1900s. So you would actually bring in your own bottle to the liquor shop, and they would fill it up right out of the barrel that the rum was aging in. And then it was after World War I, they started to recycle old champagne bottles, which they got from the British Navy, who were clearly having a great time on the island. And they took the old champagne bottles from the dockyard back to their shop, which was now located in Hamilton. They said they cleaned them up and then filled them with rum, put a used cork in it, and sealed the cork with black wax. So originally the rum was just called Old Rum, and it was a blend of several different rums. At the time, they also sold straight Jamaican rum, straight Barbados rum. They had sherry, all those sort of products on draft as well. But it was this blend of rum that became the most popular with the locals. And so Old Rum was identified with black wax on the top of the bottle. And locals are big on nicknames here. So they would go in the shop, they would see the champagne bottle with no label and just black wax on the cork. And they started to ask for the rum with the black seal. Took Goslings about 30 years to clue in, realizing they were the only ones still calling it Old Rum. Everyone else had nicknamed it the Black Seal.
Yeah.
And a gentleman by the name of Francis Gosling, whose nickname was Goose, And Goose was one of the sixth generation of the Goslin family, and he was the accountant of the family as well.
Okay.
And he was the one that illustrated the barrel juggling seal as a play on words for the wax seal. We only have 3 seals that reside in Bermuda at the aquarium. There's none in the wild around here, but lots of black seal bottles. It's like it's in every person's household here.
Yeah.
It's a part of our culture. There's many different traditions besides just consuming it with ginger beer. It's really, a popular spirit for the island.
Yeah. And so, first of all, as a history guy, thank you. Like, I love that. Like, that's so cool. So you mentioned about ginger beer, and we'll talk about the RTDs. We're going to talk about the RTDs now, but you'll see it featured in the website and the podcast, or not in the. You'll see it featured on the website and the social channels as summer progresses. But it's very interesting. Ginger beer and rum, like that was something I hadn't heard of before, and then it piqued my interest when we got the release about it. So, what makes the rum and ginger beer? Is that like the local cocktail? Is that like
Yeah, so the Dark and Stormy is actually known as our national drink here in Bermuda. As I said, we're a British colony, and we wanted to figure out a way to express our national identity, and everybody agreed an alcoholic beverage was the best way to do that. But yeah, ginger beer is also a British tradition introduced to the island by the British Navy. They also introduced it to a lot of their other territories. For example, it's popular in Australia and Jamaica. They have a very distinctive style of ginger beer as well. But the Bermuda ginger beer is known as stone ginger beer. So big ceramic flagons, they would put the ginger root, water, yeast, and it would ferment naturally. And the British Navy kept it because it was good to settle stomachs of the sailors out at sea. So that's kind of how ginger beer ended up here in Bermuda. And the ginger beer factory was set up in the dockyard, and they had an excess of ginger beer and began selling it to the local community. And it didn't take long for the locals to figure out what the ginger beer was missing.
Yeah.
Black Seal Rum.
Yeah, it's missing the old rum, right? Yeah.
On top of the ginger beer, it looks like a storm cloud. So that's where the name Dark and Stormy came up. There's no one individual that's credited with discovering it or naming it. It was just, a nickname that Black Seal Rum and ginger beer got here on the island. So ginger beer is a popular soft drink here as well now. It's not just a chaser, as we call it. Kids enjoy the ginger beer as a soft drink here. I'm pretty sure we probably consume more ginger beer than something like Coca-Cola. It's a very, very popular. Every barbecue you go to, there's a 2-liter bottle of ginger beer somewhere on the picnic table. It's very
cool.
Common.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to trying the RTDs. There's 3 flavors, I believe, for the RTDs.
Yeah. So the ready-to-drink Dark and Stormy, they started canning that here in Bermuda in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
So long before canned cocktails were a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Goslings at that time was really just listening to their customer. Everyone's like, oh, we're way ahead of the time. But, it was the Bermuda lifestyle that really demanded that portable Dark and Stormy. I mean, to make a Dark and Stormy, you need a glass, you need ice, you need ginger beer, you need Goslings Black Seal Rum, and a wedge of lime. So to have it all perfectly mixed in a can was perfect to take out on the golf course, the picnics, out on the boat, the beach, anywhere, you needed that ready-to-drink Dark and Stormy. And it was in 1980 when Goslings trademarked the name Dark and Stormy, June 9th, 1980.
Okay.
And so, we started celebrating Dark and Stormy Day in 2020 when it was the 40th anniversary of the Dark and Stormy trademark. And the trademark, was to help protect the integrity of the cocktail and also the ready-to-drink can version.
Yeah. And
then in 2011, that Goslings introduced the ready-to-drink for the international market. So we've been featuring it in North America and Europe since then.
Yeah.
And 2020, what are we now? 2022 introduced the flavor innovations of Dark and Stormy. So we still have the original Dark and Stormy, which is by far the most popular on the island, but the flavors have been really well received. And I think they opened up the demographic of the Dark and Stormy a little bit by introducing the flavors,
Yeah.
The mango Dark and Stormy, pineapple Dark and Stormy, and then black cherry.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to do a tropical one. That was kind of, and pineapple, mango, those were pretty obvious. And when we started tasting them, the ginger really helps to bring the flavor all together. That spice is just perfect.
Yeah.
And then it was Malcolm Gosling Jr., who's the 8th generation of the family. And his father's still CEO of the business, the 7th generation, Edmund Malcolm Gosling, but he goes by Malcolm. And then, so Malcolm Jr. suggested the black cherry flavor to his father. And it's obviously a very popular flavor in the US.
Yeah.
And it's proved to be really tasty as well. And it does better in North America than it does here in Bermuda. But the mango pineapple is sort of, the top of the flavors.
So, but you said something really critical. Even if you get the RTD, we should be pouring it in a glass and then putting a lime wedge in it, right? Or a lemon wedge.
I mean, the RTDs are very well balanced. They're definitely designed to be consumed out of the can.
Okay.
No doubt about that. I mean, you might have some people that will pour it over ice, but no, I think they're perfect just the way they are. And, we haven't really messed with the formula since we started making them. I mean, it's Goslings Black Seal Rum and ginger beer. I mean, Goslings started making ginger beer in 2009 with a company called Polar Beverages from Worcester, Massachusetts. And they're the largest family-owned soft drink company in the U.S. So that was really important for the Goslings to partner with another family business on the ginger beer. And the reason they introduced the ginger beer was a tool to help sell the rum. It was hard to get ginger beer in all the markets we were starting to export to. And now there's, dozens of amazing ginger beers available in North America, and it's really kind of blown up.
Yeah.
And the Goslings ginger beer, we also introduced the diet the same year. And that's my boss, Malcolm's favorite. He calls it dark and skinny. Stormy. But, people are watching their calories now. That's a thing. And, in 2009, I think diet was less than 10% of total sales, where now it's over 30% of total sales.
That's wild.
Is the diet ginger.
That's wild. But I mean, that's awesome. So we've now talked about the thing that all the fad people would like to talk about is the RTDs, but the real kind of coup de grace is the rum itself. So dark rum, this isn't, your clear Malibu rum or anything like that. And there's nothing wrong. There's time and place for Malibu or Captain Morgan or anything like that. I'm not poo-pooing on that, everyone. Just thought I'd say it for the people in the back. But there's something to be said about Caribbean or dark rum that is gone through the process of being distilled and treated similar to whiskey that we talk about all the time here on the Bourbon Lens. So for you all, right, you said there's not a lot of agricultural need. Are you still going by the same process where you're purveying rum from around, I'm going to assume, the Caribbean, and then bringing that back to you? And then you're doing the blending?
Worked with, several distilleries for generations. These are not new partnerships. And they're all the old British West Indies, right? So these were relationships that were established in the mid 1800s, late 1800s. And we source rum out of Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and British Guyana as well. And so all those rums are imported here to the island, and we do the blending and some aging here on the island, as well as bottling. And in 1980, we were bottling for export here. That's when Goslings first started export from the island. So even though they've been blending rum in Bermuda since the early 1800s, export was never a priority until Edmund Malcolm, the seventh generation. He went to Boston College. He used to bring up bottles like every Bermudian does. You can always spot a Bermudian on a plane leaving the island because they have the cardboard suitcase with the duty-free Goslings to share with all their friends. And he knew there was a demand for the rum in the export market, whereas his father and uncle, they didn't see the potential. They were quite happy operating a wholesale distribution of wines and spirits here on the island. So it's really Malcolm that pioneered the growth of Goslings in the export market. And so now we bottle also in Kentucky.
Okay.
And we bottle in Montreal, Canada, and Holland as well to supply all of our global markets. But every drop of Goslings is blended here in Bermuda. And my youngest brother, Alex, is the master blender. So he's in charge of all the production here on the island. And there's only a handful of us that know exactly what he does down there. So it's quite a closely guarded family secret.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's cool that your family's now a part of that, right? That family.
Yeah,
secret.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, one family and another family. I mean, I've known the Goslings pretty much my entire life. My mother grew up with Malcolm's sister, and it's a small community here. And I got the opportunity to work for Malcolm right out of university. I was, like every Bermudian, I said, bringing rum with me to Canada, and I would make rum swizzle and share it with my friends. And time there was no distribution in Canada. Malcolm was just working in the US and a little bit out in the UK. So we worked together on how to get the brands moving in Canada. And now that's one of our biggest export markets. So still doing pretty well out there.
Oh, that's cool. So, for you all, are you all taking a blend of both styles of rum, right? Because there's, and I'm gonna butcher this, so correct me where I'm wrong, but there's molasses based rum, and then there is like cane syrup rum. Is that correct? Or
there's cane syrup rums, and then there's cane juice rums.
Cane juice, well. That's what it is.
Yeah. So cane syrup is basically because the cane juice, you have to ferment that right away and distill it. There's you can't just leave cane juice lying around. So in order for distilleries to run past the sugarcane season, they would reduce the sugarcane juice to make a sugarcane syrup that is stable in tanks that you can continue running distills throughout the off season of harvesting sugarcane. But all the styles of rum that we make at Goslings are molasses based.
Okay.
So a lot of the sugarcane based rums tend to come from the French Caribbean.
Got it.
And the French have their own AOC designation for the island of Martinique, and they also work with Guadeloupe, Marie-Galante, and Réunion, and also the Madeira. Madeira, even though it's a Portuguese territory, also can call their rum agricole. So when you see the term rum agricole, it's a French style of rum made from fresh pressed cane juice, and that sort of originated because once the demand for sugar in Europe fell, the introduction of the sugar beet, they didn't need the sugar from their colonies in the West Indies as much. So the demand fell, and in the French islands, they figured out pretty quickly that rather than processing the cane juice into sugar and molasses being the byproduct, they would just ferment the cane juice and make rum from it. And it was a much better value add than making the molasses and the sugar, because there was just no demand for the sugar. So that's where that style of rum sort of originated. And then in Brazil, they make cachaça, which is made from the fresh pressed cane juice as well.
Gotcha.
But there are some other islands that use cane juice to ferment. But most of the British and Spanish styles of rum are all made from molasses, which is the byproduct of converting the sugarcane into sugar.
Yeah. To be honest, I feel like there's a richness to that. Right. And, for you all, right. So this gets into the international trade part of this, right? So a lot of people would say, well, just load the barrels up and bring them over. Well, loading the barrels up probably is a pain in the ass because there's not a lot of room for it. So are you all tankering that wherever you're getting it, bringing in, and then are you rebarreling it there in Bermuda?
Yeah. So up to the 1980s, the rum was all shipped in oak casks. But now we use ITU tanks. We fill them with about 20,000, 22,000 liters and those come up from our distillery partners through New Jersey to get to Bermuda on the Oleander container ship. So the Oleander arrives in Bermuda every Sunday, and it's a blessing. That's how we get a lot of our produce. That's how we get our building materials, our tanks of rum, our empty bottles, and all that.
Yeah.
So it all ships through New Jersey. But we do a lot of barrel aging of the rum at our distillery partners. For a couple different reasons. One is the warm tropical climate.
Yeah.
The rum matures in that tropical climate. There's no replicating that. They do age rum in continental climate, and those are usually rums that you want to mature for 12 years or more. But you don't often find rums aged in the tropics for too much longer than 15 years, because obviously it's a lot. The angel share is a pretty high percentage in those hot tropical climates. We do age a lot of rum here in Bermuda now. That's increased a lot over the years that I've been with the company. We've discovered that Bermuda has a very unique climate for aging based on the fact it's subtropical, and of course our location. So you get those cool, damp winters, kind of like you do in Kentucky, and then those hot, humid summers. So that contrast in temperature, I think, makes quite an interesting spirit aging here on the island, especially if we're going to age it a little longer. So yeah, different from the tropics where it's just hot all the time. I think the contrast really makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And what I found to be really interesting when I went to the distilleries down in Barbados, for instance, was how many Jack Daniel's barrels are used, right? Like, and the Tennessee whiskey flavor is like, oh, it's like, hey, I can start to get a little bit of that mellowed charcoal out of this. You know, are your all's partners getting barrels from all over the place when they're picking
We
from?
source all once used American oak barrels.
Yeah.
So majority of them are once used bourbon casks, although recently we have started experimenting with rye whiskey barrels.
Yep.
And we haven't released any yet, but we've got some brandy casks as well that we're also experimenting with aging on the island.
Now, see, I like that. It brings out some more flavors, right? Because, you know, molasses is a very distinct note. Like it's kind of stays in a vein. But what I will tell you is, you've seen me sipping. No one can see this, but I've been sipping through, and I've tried one. I'm on to my second one. And I can tell that you're blending some stuff together because the flavor profiles are vastly different. There's some sharing notes, right? There's some notes that are similar. So for the regular consumer here in the States, it looks like there's 5 products that might be available. Obviously, the Goslings Black Seal is kind of the go-to.
That's the flagship.
Yeah. And then the Goslings Spirited Seas Ocean Aged. That's the first one I tried. So what makes that different than Black Seal?
So because we work with a number of distillery partners across different nations, you know, it really gives us a unique opportunity to highlight the qualities of each distillery through blending. And, you know, the Black Seal rum, I mean, that's the recipe that was created in the early 1800s by, you know, Malcolm's forefathers. And that's something that we don't mess with, you know, that's made according to the way it was made a very long time ago. And the old rum is based on the Black Seal blend, but aged a lot longer in the old bourbon casks. So the Spirited Seas, it does have one component in that blend that is used in the Black Seal rum, but there's some other marks of rum that are used to blend that rum. And Spirited Seas was created because we wanted to have a rum in between Black Seal and old rum's price point. We thought that was a gap in our portfolio. And so old rum, you know, is aged up to 20 years in the once used bourbon casks. We only bottle that once a year. And introduced in 2003. That was the first year old rum hit the market. And it was in 2023. So 20 years later, we introduced the rye barrel finish on the old rum, which kind of changed the character of the rum altogether in a really remarkable way. So yeah, Spirited Seas, we had this blend of rum that Malcolm had worked on, and we had these once used Maker's Mark barrels that had just arrived on the island that we were going to put this blend of rum in. And it was 120-foot container, so 60 barrels. They were freshly dumped. These barrels were beautiful, really nice, high quality. When we opened them up in the warehouse smelled like bourbon for about a week in a good way.
Yeah.
You know?
You're like, and, hey, these Kentuckians know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And my youngest brother, Alex, you know, he was kind of laughing at Malcolm, like, well, where are we going to put these things? You know, there wasn't much of a plan in place. And Malcolm, his son, Malcolm Jr., were hanging out at their house in Paget Parish. And Bloomfield is a beautiful old, National Trust property. It overlooks the Hamilton Harbor. And they were sitting there Sunday morning having a coffee together, probably getting ready to go play some golf. They love their golf. And the Oleander was sailing in the harbor. Our container docks are right in Hamilton Harbor. And Malcolm kind of joked to his father, like, well, what if we just filled up those barrels and put the container back on the Oleander? Kind of like joking, right? And his dad's like, wow, son, that's actually a really good idea. So, it was kind of by accident. And Malcolm reached out to Barry Brewer, who was the CEO of the container ship. And, we kind of got a favor. And the hardest part was convincing, U.S. Customs and Bermuda Customs to sort of leave this container of alcohol on board. So the original container did 80 Atlantic crossings between Port Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Hamilton, Bermuda. So just back and forth. And, in the winter months, obviously, it gets really cold in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So temperature contrast that the barrels would experience every week was pretty drastic. So it caused the barrels to expand and contract quite rapidly. Yeah. So the rum had more interaction with that charred layer of oak on the inside of those once used bourbon casks. And
Mm.
then obviously it's sloshing around in the boat as well. It can get quite rough in the winter. And
Yeah.
crossing the Gulf Stream's a thing as well. I mean, the Gulf Stream is 3.5 knot current
Mm.
itself, so you have to enter the Gulf Stream in the spot you want to make it shoots you out wherever it shoots you out. So you
Yeah.
kind of where you enter it is critical as well.
Yeah.
But this captain's been going back and forth between New Jersey and Bermuda for 20 years. So yeah, the container stayed on board there, and it was definitely an experiment. We weren't quite sure what was going to happen. I mean, dynamic aging is not a new concept. The British Navy discovered when they were shipping rum from the West Indies to London, it was noticeably better by the time it got to the UK. And so what we did was we filled 62 barrels. So we had 2 barrels that stayed on land.
Yeah.
So we would have a control sample. And when we took the container off, it was amazing how much darker the liquid on the water was because of more contact with that oak.
Yeah.
And obviously, it just tasted like it had been in the barrel much longer. So we knew we were onto something. So volume 2 was 2 containers worth. So 120 barrels, we doubled down. And volume 3 is currently on the water on the Oleander container ship. So we want to make it a perpetual offering, but it's definitely a little bit cheaper than the old rum because it's not aged as long.
Yeah.
The blend rum is about 8 years old before it goes into the barrel on the ship. And then 80 Atlantic crossings, almost a year.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's, you said every Sunday. So I was just thinking probably a year to a year and a half kind of time frame.
Yeah, just shy of a year because each crossing's a week.
Okay.
2 crossings in a week, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It goes forth and it comes here every Sunday.
Yeah. So 40 weeks or so. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. So for those who are wondering what I think of this rum, I think it's a great, easy, rum to enjoy. And it would make a hell of a cocktail. It would make a hell of a sipping rum. I think it kind of falls in the middle of both. It has a really unique palate to me. I get this almost like coffee creamer type deal going on, like French vanilla coffee cream, and a little bit of that black bean, roasted coffee kind of note going on, which is really nice because on the nose you get a little bit of a tea note, which is kind of what's going on here? But then it turns more into cocoa bean and that creamy coffee, which I don't drink coffee, but I love. I want to like coffee. I like the idea of coffee, but I don't like it. But this reminds me of why I would want to try coffee. Is now I'm hey, I want
any tropical fruit on the nose as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I got almost like a cream soda, like a great way to be those tropical fruit things you got as a kid with syrup that had it's high fructose corn syrup here, but it'd be more like molasses or something, with the pineapple and the little cherry, the banana, all that kind of mixed in. Yeah, no, it's super, super nice. And $59, I've paid a lot. I've paid a lot of money for some bad bourbon that's more expensive. So, this is a really nice whiskey. And it kind of falls in lines with Jefferson's Oceans, right? That's what I think of. I think Trey Zoller would be oh man, that's a pretty damn cool thing. Cause we're doing the ocean thing and they're doing the ocean thing. I should tell Trey, y'all need to share each other's numbers or something.
Well, they're all friends with Trey, right?
Oh no, I did not know that.
Yeah. So
there we go.
Trey is part of Castle Brands, who's our importing company.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
So, yeah, Castle Brands, acquired Jefferson's bourbon from Trey.
Yeah.
Believe me, we're all friends and lots of conversations over lots of whiskey and lots of rum.
Yeah. No, that's great. And see, look, we made a bourbon tie-in and we didn't even mean to.
He's very innovative. And actually, the last time I was in Louisville was with Malcolm Gosling, and we bumped into Trey unexpectedly. And of course, it was not an early night after that.
Yeah. No, Trey will go, and for everyone listening, much respect to Trey. And I know he's going through a difficult time as his dad just passed. So if you are the praying kind, definitely send up a prayer for him and his family. That's never fun to lose a titan in the whiskey industry like his dad was. But continuing on in the whiskey profile, now we're getting to the old rum, right? The namesake, right? To what the callback. And so this would be kind of your first premium rum, right? In that $79, $80 range.
Black Seal in Bermuda, I think old rum sort of helped define the sipping rum category here on the island. Like
Yeah.
prior to that, people just sip Black Seal. Not that there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, like we have a saying in Bermuda, good rum doesn't need chaser, bad rum doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
You just sip it all neat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Black Seal, as I said, we have culinary traditions with it on the island and everything like that. So, it was very versatile here. But the old rum is something that Bermudians save for special occasions. That's the birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, anything you really want to celebrate. We reach for a bottle of old rum. Also, something you gift a lot as well. It comes in a nice box. When you're traveling overseas, you bring old rum for your friends and family. So, it's sort of came about by accident as well. Teddy Gosling, Malcolm's uncle, was in charge of the bottling plant in the 1970s. And he had a tradition whenever he bottled Black Seal, he would take one bottle off the line, sometimes two, and pour it in a barrel he had over in the corner of the warehouse. So we also bottle overproof Black Seal rum as well, 151 proof. And so sometimes, a bottle of 151 went in the barrel and whatever. So he would decanter these bottles out and share with his family at Christmas. They always got together at Christmas, and Teddy would bring these bottles of his secret stash of rum. So they all agreed that the Black Seal aging in the barrel longer had improved the character of the rum. So in the early 1980s, instead of bottling all the Black Seal they blended, they took some of that finished blend at 120 proof and back into a once-used bourbon barrel aged here in Bermuda. And so in 2003, they introduced what I called the Dark Family Secret, but it's the Goslings Family Reserve Old Rum. Yeah, and it took Malcolm like 2 minutes to come up with the packaging. He's like, it's obviously going to go in an old champagne bottle and be dipped in wax. And he had to put a label on it and some other mandatories, but the packaging was pretty easy to figure out and very distinctive. And I think, people see that on the shelf and they think, what is that? Is it a wine? Is it? No, it's a rum. Yeah, it's quite a unique bottle with an amazing story.
Yeah, and it's got a hell of a flavor profile. I mean, like that thing, I don't know what the proof is on it, but
old rum's 80 proof.
Yeah, so like I was thinking it's going to be light, like 90 somewhere is kind of where I was guessing, but like great sipping, like experience, like it almost what I had, and I don't know if the batch changes, from year to year as you all do it, but like it had like a pop of ginger to me. It was really refreshing. It was, it felt like a cocktail in a glass. Like I didn't have to add anything to it. If I wanted to put some ice in it and just like make it a simple highball, it'd be perfect. Like, now you don't really want to do that to really good rum, like is make it a highball, but you could, and it would just enhance it. I mean, for your money, $80, like, holy shit.
Yeah, again, outstanding value. And you're seeing that as the price of whiskeys are starting to rise, I mean, Scotch, bourbons, all those, the prices inflation's real.
Yeah.
And, the rum category, I still think has a lot of gems that are extremely good value. And I think old rum is certainly one of those, and it's been recognized by a lot of enthusiasts as a great sipping spirit, and when I first started sampling it to people, I would sample it blind. I wouldn't tell them what it was, and just hear their remarks. And I remember there was this group from Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. We were doing a tasting for them, and they all were like, "Oh, this brandy is delicious!" And I was so excited to come out and tell them, "Well, actually, you're drinking rum." So yeah, and each batch is a little different. I will have to say that, and that's part of the fun of it all. Is each year when we're blending old rum, we select various different barrels sets to blend together to make that rum. And we're doing about 26,000 bottles annually of the old rum right now. So
nice.
It's a pretty good amount.
Yeah.
And, obviously it's sold here in Bermuda, but it is available in all.
Yeah, definitely findable at 26,000. I mean, like that's a lot of units that are out there. And so now I got to try this other one because it's the same stuff finished in rye whiskey barrels. And I'm like, well, I know what rye does. Rye makes things a little bit spicier. It makes it a little bit more punchy. And like I smelled the nose and I'm like, boom, there's the rye characteristic on that.
It's pretty pronounced. Yeah. And, again, that was an experiment too. We got a container of these rye barrels in and filled them with old rum that had already been aged in the bourbon cask. So it wasn't like the raw Black Seal blend. This was, rum that had already had significant age in Bermuda in the bourbon cask. And then into the rye barrels. And So this particular blend, the 2023 release, is actually 3 different sets of rye whiskey barrels.
Okay.
The oldest set aged for an additional 5 years. But we
Wow.
found when we were sampling that it had almost, I don't want to say too much of the rye character, but it was very pronounced. Lots of oak, lots of spice, the white pepper, things like that. So
Yeah.
we blended some younger sets of barrels with it to create something that we thought is really well balanced. I mean, the color is beautiful. It sips amazing on its own. And my suggested serve is a Manhattan. So
Okay.
you substitute the whiskey for the old rum rye barrel finish and some good sweet vermouth, dash of bitters, and off you go.
Well, and I can tell you all of these rums are definitely viscous. They have nice mouthfeel. And, I'm just sniffing this. If you put this in a dark container, like instead of a glass that everyone can see,
Yeah.
and you put a really botanical, like fruit forward gin in front of someone, you might be able to mess with them a little bit. Because it does have like that gin, like there's some lemon, there's some like the botanicals are there. Like, there's like the tropical fruits like orange and, there's all that zestiness. I mean, that's what I like about this just on the nose is all of it gives me summer vibes in the nose, and I haven't even drank it yet. And now, does this stay at 80 proof as well?
Yes, it is 80 proof too. There's a big movement, I guess, obviously towards, cask strength spirits and things like that. But I think it's still a very small segment of the overall consumers are into that, So yeah, Malcolm wanted to keep this 80 proof. The Spirited Seas, however, we did bottle at 88 proof.
Okay.
And when we started sampling out of the barrel and breaking it down, proofing it, we sampled it at 80 proof, and he was like, this isn't it. It needed a little more body to it. So that's how we set it on 88 proof. We felt like we were leaving something on the table. But both those old rums at 80 proof show so much complexity.
Oh,
Maybe an opportunity to release a stronger or cask strength in the future. But I think as they are, and we want people to enjoy them neat. I mean, obviously you can mix it, but this is something that we want people to sip and savor. So I think the proof is really good on those rums.
Yeah, and that's what I like about this. It is made for the sipping experience. It's not made for how manly can I be, tonight while I'm drinking. Like, I as a bourbon enthusiast, aka bourbon nerd, whiskey nerd, like the community in large is like, oh, give me the proof. Okay, but I can tell you a lot more about the imperfections at 80, at 90. I can tell you if the whiskey was made good or if the rum was made good at 80 or 90 proof. It's hard to tell you the imperfections at 150. And that's not a bad thing. And I'm not saying that to anyone else. My preference is under 115. That's why I like whiskey. Because I could add water. I could drink it neat. Here, when I think of rum, I think of this and I come to it more summer, fall. I think it's a really great fall transition, especially in Kentucky when you're still getting 70-degree days and maybe 50-degree nights. Like rum fits really, especially dark room like you all are created, really fits in that category for a cocktail. It switches you up out of whiskey a little bit. And this rye, man, like I really thought that each one I was like, oh, that's going to be my favorite one. But the rye one, man, it's outstanding. It's a really, really good pour whiskey. Or I'm saying whiskey because it reminds me of whiskey. It's a really good pour.
One of the goals with the rye barrel finish too was to get the whiskey consumer excited about the rum category. And I think we're starting to get there. And there's lots of other great rums on the market, but whiskey's. Whiskey drinkers, we want you to drink rum, please.
Yeah,
come over to the dark side, right?
So sign me up for this. I mean, like, I really like. It's like lemon blueberry pancakes with maple syrup on it. Like that is what I'm getting in this glass, and I am not mad at it at all. Now I just want to go make pancakes. It's too late to have that many carbs, but this is really good. This is really enjoyable. And so we've talked through what I have to sample, but there's the big one. It's called the Papa Seal. For those, those highfalutin people that really want to celebrate, it's this almost $200, rum. What's that about? Why have the halo?
So Papa Seal is a single barrel rum, and Papa Seal is Edmund Malcolm Goslings, the seventh generation. That's his nickname, right? So his father was Malcolm Lloyd Gosling, right? So of course he named his son Malcolm Lloyd Gosling the second. So all of his son's friends started calling him Papa Seal. It was just a nickname. And we teased him for long enough and said, when you're going to create a rum called Papa Seal, And Malcolm coined the phrase "the father of all rums," right? So that was kind of the joke. And then he low-key secretly blended this rum and took it into these once-used Heaven Hill casks that we had laying around down there. Really nice barrels, and aged it there. And then in 2018, introduced the single barrel rum. So we bottled 12 barrels initially. 11 of them were sold to private customers, and barrel number one was reserved for sale in Bermuda.
Nice.
And we ran one newspaper ad in the Royal Gazette, right? No social media, no nothing, just one newspaper ad. And when I got to work that morning, all these people were lined up outside our retail shop. And at first, I didn't even clue in. I was like, what are these people out here for? And then I get there and I realized, wait a minute, they're lining up to buy this rum, which at the time, nobody outside of the inner circle of the Goslings family had even tasted. It was just the Papa Seal's here, and everyone's like, oh my God, I need to get a bottle. And of course, each bottle is hand labeled, hand numbered. It's all bottled here in Bermuda by Alex. It's a very painstaking process. Actually,
it's a love. It's a labor of love, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that definitely contributes to the price. The fact that it's packaged here in Bermuda, and then shipped over in a container to the U.S. So now we've released, I think, 36 barrels of Papa Seal to date. One went to the U.K. We sent a couple to Canada, and majority of it went out to the U.S. So it is a little harder to get your hands on. And in Bermuda, we launch it in November. So right in time for holiday gifting season.
Yeah.
And we also offer the option to personalize the bottles here. So people put, their birthdays, their names, their house name, their friends, whoever.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a thing here in Bermuda is if you get a bottle of Papa Seal gifted to you, it's like, wow, that person went out of their way to get their hands on that bottle. So it's still, remain very strong here in Bermuda. And again, we're not going to release a whole lot of that in the near future, one barrel at a time.
Yeah.
And, sneak it out. So it's Malcolm's nickname and his the father of all rums, Papa Seal.
Now I need to find a bottle of it myself. Oh well, we'll figure it out one day at a time. It's
very different from the rums you tasted today. Too,
exactly. Right? That's why I'm trying to.
We're not distilling here on the island, right? We don't have one still. It's not one type of fermentation. It's we have the ability to source different marks of rum to create something that's quite unique. Although for the past 6 years, we've been lobbying the government, and in last year, 2023, they passed the Distillery Act here on the island. So technically, it's been illegal to distill in Bermuda. So that's why there's never been any distillery here. But there's also no raw material to distill either. But the goal is for Goslings to establish a craft scale distillery on the island here.
Yeah.
In the near future as well. So we're getting closer to that too. But again, that'll produce a unique mark that we can use for blending or, single cast stuff as well.
Just have something fun, right?
Exactly. The future is definitely going to have a small distillery on the island.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. No, this has been great. So Andrew, where can people find out more about Goslings as a whole? So, this summer as they go out, they want one of these really good rums, or they want one of these RTDs. Where can they find you all on social media or?
Yeah, obviously our website as well, goslingsrum.com is a great resource for all things Goslings. There's a store locator on there as well. Our distribution is pretty good. You can get these rums on Reserve Bar. You can get them on caskers. You can order the RTDs. Walmart sells the ginger beer.
So there we go.
Easy way to get the ginger beer. Even CVS sells Goslings ginger beer now, right?
Yeah.
It's become a household name all over the place. But our Instagram too is always a lot of fun to follow. We have a new campaign that we're leading into right now called Goslings is the official rum of leisure. Because, in Bermuda, we're all about the leisure lifestyle. And I think, as a whole, we all aspire to have more leisure time, more time to play golf with friends, to play tennis with your family, and, all that type of vibe. So I think, we're kind of leaning into the rum of leisure, and you can see some really cool, visuals on our Instagram and be inspired on what to do with the rums and how to consume them.
I'm in. I need more leisure in my life. And that's why literally as we've finished up this podcast, I'm looking up tickets to Bermuda. And it's literally just Bermuda, BDA.
Yeah.
I wish I could just be like, click, win free, but like, I'm not going to go during all of this will be cut.
We got to get you down there at some point soon.
Oh yeah. I mean, hey, if Goslings one takes me, that's even better.
One of the best times to visit is end of July, beginning of August. The whole island shuts down for a 2-day cricket match.
Oh, sick.
And, the event is called Cup Match. It dates back to the emancipation of slavery on the island. It's a huge cultural event. So that's one of the best times to visit Bermuda if you want to see it in its finest.
To be honest, it's really not bad price-wise. I was just looking in January. I know that's probably a little bit off of profile, but it's $700. That's not bad. That's doable.
But in January, you're still out there playing golf in a short sleeve shirt, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful time to visit if you're into it. We call it golf and spa season. January through March.
I'm in. I don't have to convince my wife much to do golf and spa season. She's definitely in on the spa part. But yeah, no, this has been great. I now have some homework to do with the RTDs as I did my homework with you here on the rum, but excited to put the podcast out. I want people to know that there's alternatives to whiskey this summer, and dark rum from Bermuda is something that they need to be thinking about. So Andrew, appreciate you hanging out with me until 10:30 Bermudan time.
Time.
Yeah. Time in the middle of the ocean that I'm not used to. So really, man, really appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on, and we'll definitely look forward to continued conversations about Goslings moving forward. So everybody,
thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll meet each other in person very soon.
Definitely. Everyone have a great night, and cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.